Lincoln Highway in Pennsylvania is a beautiful drive, but there's a lot of white-knuckle moments on these steep grades. We're at the Lincoln Motor Court, a motel from the early 1940s here in Man's Choice, Pennsylvania. Still in business, it's the last motor court on Lincoln Highway. A motor court is a motel that caters to people driving a car. They could park right outside their room as opposed to walking through a hotel lobby. Motor courts typically had 12 individual cabins just like this. I read that a woman in her 90s stopped here a few years back to see the room where she and her husband spent their honeymoon. Immediately after the honeymoon, he was shipped off to fight in World War II. I can't imagine marrying somebody and then possibly never seeing them alive again. The interior of these cabins are still maintained with the 1940s decor. One of the rooms even has a 1940s style radio that plays radio shows from that era. The owner of the motel gave me a sticker of it. I appreciate that, and I especially appreciate them preserving this piece of American history. What do we have here in the middle of nowhere? A faded Lincoln Highway mural on a barn. Not only is the mural disappearing, but the video clip I made of this barn disappeared from my laptop. But here's what it looked like before it faded. It's 3 men in a 1930s car on one side of the barn, and on the other side are 2 1930s cars passing each other on the Lincoln Highway. You can barely see the mural now, it's faded so much. And it was painted less than 20 years ago. That's a shame. It was a beautiful piece of artwork. There's the Pied Piper at the end of someone's driveway. He's a remnant from Storyland, which was a fairy tale theme park opened in this area in the 1950s. It closed in the 80s. The original Pied Piper was a medieval character who was hired by a town to lure rats away using his magical pipe. When the town didn't pay him for his rat removal services, he would retaliate by luring their children away with that same pipe. Now he's in Pennsylvania with no purpose. A purposeless Pied Piper on private property in Pennsylvania. The September 11th Flight 93 Memorial is right here on the Lincoln Highway. This is the Tower of Voices. It has giant wind chimes. The chiming represents the voices of 40 people who on September 11th took a vote deciding that they would storm the cockpit of that plane and fight terrorism. My memory isn't great, probably because of my ADD, but I remember September 11th vividly, and I want to recount my version of that day to make sure I always remember it. It was a beautiful sunny September day in the Northeast, both in New York City and in Rhode Island where I was at the time. My late husband and I owned a small assisted living. We had 18 residents, and we did most of the work ourselves, except for a cleaning lady. My husband made breakfast for the residents 5 days a week because he was a morning person, but I cooked breakfast on Tuesdays and Sundays. Tuesday was pancake day, and I had just served them and sat in front of the television at a tray table so I could fill syringes with insulin for our diabetic resident. Watching a fall fashion segment on the Today Show seemed like it would be just another Tuesday, but suddenly Matt Lauer cut in and said that a plane hit the World Trade Center. But he didn't have any details yet, so I assumed it was a small plane that lost its way. It was just a couple of years earlier that JFK Jr. died in a plane crash after becoming disoriented, so I figured it was something like that. I never imagined it was a commercial jet. Then a little while later, Matt Lauer came on again saying that another plane hit the World Trade Center, and I remember thinking that maybe all the smoke from the first plane affected visibility to cause the second crash. I wasn't sure what to think. But Matt Lauer knew right away that it was probably a terrorist attack. Then a little later, one of the buildings collapsed. I remember running into the bathroom to tell my husband, who had just woken up. My main reaction was disbelief at this point. It was just so ridiculous to think that the world's tallest buildings would just disintegrate like that. Now, I thought the building must have been empty by then. It didn't fall right away. But when the details started to come out about firefighters dying trying to get people out, that's when it hit me that a lot of people were still in the World Trade Center. And then they showed rescue personnel ready and waiting for the injured, but the reality was that people either got out of the building alive or they died in there. Then the news reported that the Pentagon was hit, and my sister was working for the government in that area then. That was very concerning for my family. Luckily, she wasn't affected. On TV, they'd show families walking around New York City with photos of their loved ones looking for them. The couple of weeks after it happened, I never cried so much in my life hearing the stories of the people lost. I remember hearing low-flying military planes for a while after it happened, which freaked us out because we didn't know if it was another attack. We had an elderly couple at our assisted living. The husband, who was in his 80s, insisted on watching the news all day, every day. Of course, the news kept showing the planes crashing into the buildings multiple times a day for a long time after it happened. His wife had short-term memory loss, so every time she saw a plane crash into a building on TV, it was like she was seeing it for the first time over and over again. A half dozen times a day I'd hear, "Oh my God, did you see that plane hit a building?" Then her husband would patiently explain what happened, but sometimes he would just ignore her and let her get all upset. It was brutal. The gate to the crash site. One of the passengers told his wife over the phone that, "I know we're all going to die, but 3 of us are going to do something about it." This is where those brave souls stormed the cockpit, sacrificing their own lives to prevent a bigger tragedy.